What if the person you thought you knew had lived a life filled with sacrifices you never imagined? This funeral changed everything. At Cypress Grove Cemetery, a somber crowd gathered around a freshly dug grave. Quiet murmurs floated on the gentle breeze as family, friends, and acquaintances had come together to honor Robert Henley, a man celebrated for his charitable work and his warm, compassionate presence in the community. The polished black headstone shone in the afternoon sun, its inscription reading, "A life of service and sacrifice." Amid the mourners, one elderly black woman stood apart, not by design but by the gravity of her bearing. She wore a deep green dress that flowed modestly around her, and her silver hair was neatly concealed beneath a simple hat. Clutched in her hand was a single red rose. Although her hands remained steady, her eyes betrayed a sorrowful depth that surpassed that of those around her. While others exchanged polite greetings, few acknowledged her, and she chose instead to stand silently at the edge of the crowd. There was something both commanding and understated about her presence. It was not until the pastor had concluded his final prayer that she slowly stepped forward, making her way toward the front. The only sound was the crunch of gravel beneath her heels as the mourners parted to let her through. When she reached the grave, she paused, looking down at the polished casket with a reverence that spoke of intimate memories and unspoken pain. With great care, she placed the rose on top of the casket and turned to face the crowd. "My name is Hattie DeLay," she began in a voice that was both steady and clear. "I doubt many of you know me, but I knew Robert better than anyone here." A ripple of surprise passed through the gathered crowd. Faces turned toward one another as brows furrowed and mouths whispered in curiosity. Who was this woman, and how could she claim such an intimate connection to the man they all thought they knew so well? Hattie's gaze swept over the sea of faces, her expression calm yet resolute. "Before today ends, you will understand why I am here, and you will understand the Robert Henley most of you never truly knew." Her words hung in the air, heavy with an unspoken promise. What Hattie was about to reveal would force everyone to question everything they thought they knew about the man they had come to honor. As the murmurs subsided, leaving only the rustle of leaves in the gentle wind, Hattie drew in a deep breath. Her voice carried a calm authority that compelled everyone to listen. "I met Robert 50 years ago," she began, her eyes distant as if the memories were unfolding before her. "It was not in this town, but in Montgomery, Alabama, during a time when people like me were not welcome in places such as these." The crowd leaned in slightly, curiosity flickering in their eyes. Hattie continued, her tone a blend of pride and pain. "Robert was a young man then, full of fire and ambition. He worked as a teacher, yet his heart belonged to the civil rights movement. It was on the steps of a church that we first crossed paths while organizing sit-ins. He was not afraid to stand by my side, even if it meant risking his job or facing threats." Gasps rippled through the group. The Robert they had known, a generous, kind benefactor, was now revealed as someone deeply involved in struggles for justice, a side of him that none had ever heard of before. Hattie let her words settle in the silence before pressing on. "We were more than mere comrades in the fight for justice," she said softly. "We became like family to each other when the world seemed intent on tearing us apart. He was there for me when I lost my sister to the violence of those tumultuous times, and I was there for him when he had to rebuild his life after being ostracized by his own community." Her hand trembled slightly as she adjusted her hat, her gaze fixed on the casket. "We shared meals, stories and tears. He called me his sister in every way that truly mattered, even when it was not safe for him to say it out loud." At that moment, the crowd shifted uncomfortably as the gravity of her words sank in. It was hard for them to reconcile this image of Robert with the polished philanthropist they remembered, the man who had quietly offered his help to many but had never spoken of the personal battles he had fought. "But," Hattie said, her voice growing firmer, "what I am telling you is not just about the past. It is about the man he became because of those struggles." She paused, scanning the crowd and allowing a moment of silence to stretch just long enough for her next words to resonate. "What I am about to share will pull back the curtain on sacrifices that none of you could have ever imagined." Her hands clenched tightly around her purse as she continued, her voice unwavering. "I did not merely survive those trying times. I fought through them with Robert, and that fight demanded sacrifices that left marks on both of us. marks that most of you would never see." She fixed her piercing eyes on the crowd, daring anyone to look away. In 1967, Robert lost his job for attending a march in Selma. The school board called it unbecoming conduct, but we all knew what it really was: retribution. He never spoke of it here, for he did not want anyone to pity him. Instead, she went on, he packed up what little he had and moved to a small one-bedroom house on the south side of Montgomery. That was his home, a place where he scraped by on tutoring gigs, yet he never once abandoned the fight for justice. Hattie's voice cracked slightly as she continued. "When my own house was firebombed in retaliation for hosting meetings, it was Robert who showed up in the middle of the night with his car. He drove me and my 2 nephews to safety without hesitation, fully aware of the risks involved." She turned back to the casket, her expression softening as she spoke. That is who Robert was. Not the polished man in a tailored suit that most of you remember, but someone who would walk through fire for the people he cared about. The crowd stood in silence, utterly captivated, as she reached into her purse and slowly pulled out a folded piece of paper. "This," she said, holding up the paper for all to see, "is a letter Robert wrote to me in 1972. I would like to read just one part of it." With great care, Hattie unfolded the letter. Her hands trembled just enough to betray the deep emotional significance it held for her. She began to read softly, her voice trembling yet clear. "Hattie, you are the sister I chose when life gave me none. We have shared burdens that no one should ever bear, but I would carry them for you again, without a single question. You remind me every day that love is not measured by blood, it is measured by who stands by you when the world turns its back." When she reached the final line, her voice broke, and she paused to regain her composure. The previously stoic crowd now shifted visibly, some dabbing away tears, others staring at the ground in a mix of shame and introspection, for they realized how little they had known of the man they had come to honor. "Robert never turned his back on anyone," Hattie said, carefully folding the letter once more, "not even when it cost him everything. And yet how many of you here knew any of this? How many cared enough to ask?" She let the question hang in the air, her words pressing on the crowd like a heavy fog. But as the truth of Robert's sacrifices sank in, Hattie revealed something even more profound, an act of courage that would forever redefine his legacy. The atmosphere grew even heavier as Hattie pressed on, her words laced with both sorrow and defiance. "There is one more truth about Robert, a truth none of you would have guessed, yet one that shaped everything he stood for." The crowd tensed, hanging on her every word as she took a steadying breath. Robert did not only fight for others, he fought a battle that no one could see for many years. He hid the fact that he was supporting a child, a son he could not openly claim because of who the mother was. A collective gasp rippled through the group as Hattie's eyes swept over the stunned faces, but she continued without hesitation. His son, Samuel, was born to a woman Robert could not marry because of the constraints of the time and place we lived in. The boy was black, just like me, and Robert was forced to keep this part of his life hidden for fear of what it would do to his career and reputation in certain circles. Whispers grew louder as people exchanged glances of disbelief, yet Hattie was not finished. "I was there when Samuel was born," she said softly, her voice filled with a mix of tenderness and resolve, "and Robert made sure that the boy never went without. He paid for his schooling, wrote letters to him every week and visited whenever he could, often under the cover of darkness. He ensured that Samuel had everything he never had growing up, a father's love, even if it had to be a quiet, secret love." Tears welled in Hattie's eyes, but she maintained her strength as she spoke. "And now Samuel, the man you did not know existed, is here today." At that moment, a tall man stepped forward from the back of the crowd. His presence was commanding, his broad shoulders and quiet dignity a striking reminder of Robert. The resemblance was unmistakable. The crowd turned to stare in stunned silence as Samuel approached Hattie and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion, "for everything." Hattie smiled at him through her tears and then turned back to address the crowd. "Robert loved all of you in his own way," she said, "but his truest love was for the people he fought for, the people of this community, those of us who did not have the luxury of being seen in polite society. That is why I stand here today, to ensure you know the real man behind all the accolades." The silence that followed was not merely shock. It was a profound reckoning with the truth that had been hidden in plain sight for far too long. Before the mourners could fully process the revelations, Hattie had one final story to share, a moment of bravery that would define Robert's legacy forever. The crowd fell completely silent, as if the weight of her words had wrapped around them like a heavy, inescapable blanket. All eyes turned toward Samuel, who now stood tall and resolute beside Hattie, a living testament to the secrets Robert had carried throughout his life. An older man near the front cleared his throat, his voice breaking the stillness as he stammered, I never knew." "Robert never said a word about any of this," Hattie continued, her gaze softening as she looked at the man who had spoken. He was not the kind of man to seek praise for doing what was right, but, make no mistake, he carried the weight of these sacrifices every single day. A middle-aged woman with tears streaming down her face stepped forward hesitantly. "I remember him helping my family when my father lost his job," she said quietly. "I thought I understood his kindness, but now it feels so much deeper." Hattie nodded, her voice steady yet filled with emotion. Robert did not give out of convenience. He gave because he understood what it meant to go without. He never wanted anyone to experience that same pain. As her words resonated, fragments of personal memories began to surface among the mourners. Each story that was shared painted a more complete picture of a man whose generosity and inner strength were rooted in a life far more complicated than they had ever imagined. It was not just the memories that lingered in the air, but also the realization of the guilt many felt for having known only the polished version of Robert, the man who wore his success like a shield, protecting the truth of his struggles. A young man near the back finally spoke up, his voice trembling with emotion. "It's not fair," he said, his hands clenching into fists. "He deserved to be celebrated for everything, not just the parts we wanted to see." Hattie turned to him, her expression softening as she replied, "You are right. Robert was never a man who cared about credit. He cared about impact. His greatest legacy is not found in plaques on walls or in accolades on programs. It is found in the lives he touched. Yours, mine, and Samuel's." At that moment, Samuel stepped forward, his deep voice firm yet filled with a tender reverence. "My father always told me that the measure of a person is not what they leave behind in things, but what they leave behind in people. Standing here today, I see that he left behind far more than I ever imagined." The crowd seemed to exhale collectively, their collective guilt giving way to a deeper understanding of the man they had come to mourn. Tears now fell freely, tears not only for Robert's passing but for the profound realization of his unseen sacrifices. As the crowd began to grasp the full weight of Robert's life and legacy, Hattie prepared to share one final story, a moment that would leave them forever changed. She took a moment to steady herself, her hands clasped tightly together as she gazed out at the assembled mourners. The air was heavy, not only with sorrow, but with a newfound respect for the man they thought they had known. "There is one more story I need to share," she said softly, "a final act of Robert's life that will forever define his legacy," she continued, her voice quieter now. "2 months before he passed, Robert called me. He was not well, but his spirit remained unbroken. He told me that he was setting up a trust, not for himself or his estate, but for the children of this community. Children whose parents struggled to make ends meet, children who deserved opportunities yet were often overlooked." The crowd stirred once more, their expressions a mixture of surprise and awe. He knew he would not live to see the trust in action, but that did not deter him. What mattered to him was planting a seed that would grow long after he was gone. Samuel stepped forward again, his voice low but resolute as he added, "That trust is real. It has already been established and it will provide scholarships, after-school programs, and mentorship for children in need. My father wanted his life to mean something, not just for those who knew him, but for the generations that would follow." Hattie looked around, her gaze meeting the eyes of each mourner. That, my friends, was Robert's greatest gift. He did not need recognition or applause. He simply needed to know that he had done his part to make the world a little better. A long silence followed as the weight of her words settled in the hearts of everyone present. Some nodded quietly, others wiped away tears, and a few simply stood still, lost in thought. Hattie then placed her hand on the polished headstone, her voice growing softer but remaining resolute. "So now, I leave you with this. How will you be remembered? Not for the things you had or the titles you earned, but for the lives you touched and the love you gave." She turned back to the crowd, her expression kind yet firm. If Robert taught us anything, it is that true legacy is not written in stone. It is written in the hearts of the people you uplift. The crowd collectively exhaled, the emotional weight of the revelations giving way to a reflective silence. Hattie gave one final nod to Samuel before stepping back, allowing the moment to settle. As the mourners began to disperse, many approached Hattie and Samuel, offering words of gratitude and promising to honor Robert's legacy. What had once been a cemetery of somber finality had transformed into a space of renewed purpose and determination. If this story has moved you, let it serve as a reminder that kindness and sacrifice often go unseen, yet they are never truly unnoticed. Remember Robert's lesson: live a life that leaves a lasting impact on others. And as you go forth, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe so that we may continue sharing stories like this one. In the quiet aftermath of the service, as the sun began to set and cast long shadows over Cypress Grove Cemetery, the lessons of Robert Henley echoed in the hearts of all who had gathered. His life, full of secret struggles and quiet triumphs, served as an enduring example of what it means to truly live for others. Every sacrifice, every risk he took for the sake of those who were marginalized and forgotten was a testament to the transformative power of love and the unyielding strength of the human spirit. As the days passed and the memories of that solemn afternoon slowly blended into the everyday rhythm of life, the community found itself forever changed. Neighbors who had once only exchanged polite greetings began to share their own stories of quiet heroism. Local organizations, inspired by Robert's legacy, united to create programs that would help uplift the disadvantaged and empower the next generation. In every corner of the community, there was a renewed commitment to compassion and a deep understanding that true greatness lies not in accolades or wealth, but in the quiet acts of kindness that often go unnoticed. Hattie's stirring words had ignited a spark of introspection. People began to question the superficial measures by which they had judged one another. They recognized that every person carried their own hidden burdens, and that the measure of a life well lived was not how it was outwardly celebrated, but how it enriched the lives of others. Robert's secret sacrifices, his relentless commitment to fighting injustice even when it meant personal loss, had become a beacon of hope, a reminder that one person's courage can inspire change in an entire community. In the months that followed, Samuel continued to honor his father's memory by working closely with local schools, community centers, and charities. He spoke at gatherings, sharing not only the story of his father's struggles and sacrifices, but also the hope that his father had instilled in everyone he met. Through his actions, the community learned that legacy is not confined to the pages of history. It lives on in the everyday acts of caring, in the commitment to uplift others, and in the unspoken bonds that tie people together. Robert Henley's life became a quiet revolution, a movement that challenged the prevailing notion of success. It taught everyone that while material achievements may garner applause, the true measure of a person's worth is found in the love they give and the lives they touch. The story of his life, as recounted by Hattie and carried forward by Samuel, served as a timeless reminder that every sacrifice, no matter how hidden, contributes to the greater good of society. As the community continued to heal and grow, the impact of Robert's legacy was felt in every renewed effort to make the world a better place. The trust he had set up began to bear fruit, providing opportunities, fostering education, and nurturing hope in a generation that had once been overlooked. And in the quiet moments of reflection, when the bustling noise of everyday life subsided, people would often think of Robert Henley and the remarkable life he had led. His story was not one of grand gestures or public accolades, but of a quiet, relentless dedication to justice and compassion. It was a story of a man who had lived for others, who had given of himself without expecting recognition, and who had taught everyone that the true legacy of a life is measured not by wealth or status, but by the difference one makes in the hearts of others. So, as you leave this place today, let Robert's story be a guide, a call to action to live a life marked by kindness, to stand up for those who cannot stand for themselves, and to remember that every act of love, no matter how small, has the power to transform the world. In honoring his memory, may you find the courage to make a difference, to give selflessly, and to carry forward the torch of hope that he so brightly lit. In the end, Robert Henley's life was a symphony of silent sacrifices and unwavering commitment, a legacy that will forever be etched in the hearts of those he touched. His true legacy is not found in the grandeur of his achievements, but in the quiet strength of his character, the depth of his compassion, and the enduring impact of his love for others. And now, as you reflect on his life, ask yourself, how will you be remembered? Will you measure your worth by the things you have or by the lives you enrich and the love you share? Let this be the lasting lesson of Robert Henley's extraordinary life. May his example inspire you to live with purpose, to give generously, and to make the world a kinder, more compassionate place. Remember that every act of kindness, every sacrifice made in the service of others, is a step toward a brighter future. A future where true legacy is written not in stone, but in the hearts of all whose lives you touch. Thank you for listening, for reflecting, and for choosing to honor a man who believed that love and sacrifice could change the world. Let us all carry forward his legacy in our daily lives and ensure that his memory lives on in every act of goodness, every gesture of care, and every moment of true compassion. And as you leave here today, may you be inspired to make your own mark on the world. May you remember that, like Robert, you too have the power to create a legacy of lasting impact, one that will endure in the hearts of those whose lives you touch, long after you are gone. In conclusion, Robert Henley's life stands as a powerful reminder that true greatness is not measured by accolades or material wealth, but by the quiet sacrifices we make for one another. His story teaches us that every act of compassion, every moment of selflessness, and every risk taken for the sake of justice can create ripples that transform entire communities. In a world that often values surface appearances and outward success, Robert's legacy compels us to look deeper, beyond the polished image of a philanthropist, to see the real, human struggles and sacrifices that define a life of true service. His journey shows that the greatest impact we can have is through the lives we touch, the hope we inspire, and the kindness we extend to others, even when it comes at great personal cost. Robert's unwavering commitment to his community, despite facing numerous hardships and sacrifices, challenges us to rethink what it means to live a meaningful life. It is not the accolades we collect or the wealth we amass that matter most, but the genuine care we show for those around us, especially for those who may be forgotten or overlooked by society. Let his legacy serve as a call to action, to stand up for what is right, to offer support without expecting recognition, and to create positive change, even in the face of adversity. Embrace the truth that every act of kindness, no matter how small, can spark a chain reaction, fostering hope and inspiring others to follow in your footsteps. In honoring Robert's memory, we are reminded that our true worth is found in our capacity for empathy, resilience, and selfless giving. As we reflect on the lessons of his life, let us commit ourselves to living with purpose, to being agents of change in our own communities. May we challenge ourselves to look past superficial measures of success and instead focus on nurturing the bonds that connect us as human beings. By choosing to care, to uplift, and to support others, we build a legacy that endures far beyond our own lifetimes. A legacy written not in stone, but in the hearts of those we help and inspire. Ultimately, Robert Henley's legacy invites us to consider our own lives. How will we be remembered? Will we be known for the titles we earn and the wealth we accumulate, or for the compassion we show and the lives we enrich? Let his story encourage you to live boldly, love generously, and act with unwavering integrity. In doing so, you will not only honor his memory but also create a lasting impact that can change the world, one kind gesture at a time. His car, a modest, unassuming black sedan, blended effortlessly into the suburban streets, and his mind wandered to the thought of his wife's famous pot roast waiting for him at home. Suddenly, blue and red lights began flashing in his rearview mirror, slicing through the darkness like a shrill alarm. Julian's grip tightened on the steering wheel for a brief moment. He glanced down at his speedometer. It read 29, then 35. No traffic violations had been committed, and his taillights were intact. Yet the patrol car's siren wailed insistently, signaling him to pull over. "Stay calm," he muttered under his breath as he activated his turn signal and eased his car to the side of the road. He knew the routine well, the visible gestures, the slow, deliberate movement of hands, and a courteous, measured tone. It was a process he had mastered, not because he had ever committed any wrongdoing, but because he had learned that in these situations, appearances could mean everything. Before long, an officer approached his window briskly, flashlight in hand. The beam cut through the dim interior of Julian's car. Another officer lingered near the rear bumper, his hand resting casually on his holstered weapon. "You in a hurry tonight?" the first officer barked, his tone heavy with suspicion. "No, sir," Julian responded evenly, his voice calm but firm. "I'm just heading home." The officer's flashlight swept over Julian's face, lingering just a moment too long before shifting to his lap, then darting back to his face.